He thought it was just a ritual, a symbol, a tradition older than the lodge itself. Lie in the coffin, face the darkness, be reborn. That's what they told him. But when the lid closed, he realized the coffin wasn't empty, and the thing inside had been waiting for him. They said it was just his imagination, hallucinations from the darkness. But then he started hearing the breathing in his apartment, seeing the face in the mirror that wasn't his, and the voice followed him everywhere, whispering from the walls, the car, the phone. "Let me in." That's what it said. Every brother who lay in that coffin heard it, and most never lived long enough to talk about it. Now he's going back, not to join them, but to end it. To open the coffin in daylight and finish the ritual that killed a man 170 years ago. But here's the question. If you found out the dead were trapped because of you, would you set them free or seal the coffin forever? Thomas Brennan didn't believe in ghosts. He didn't believe in curses or spirits or anything he couldn't see with his own eyes. But he believed in tradition. And tradition said that to reach the highest degree, he had to lie in a coffin, alone, in the dark, while the brothers chanted around him. It was symbolic, a rebirth, death of the old self, birth of the new. That's what they told him. That's what he chose to believe. The lodge had prepared everything. The coffin sat in the center of the ritual room. Simple wood, no ornaments, no padding inside, just bare pine and shadows. Thomas had seen it earlier that day during setup. He'd even joked about it. "Looks cozy," he'd said. The older members hadn't laughed. They'd just looked at him with expressions he couldn't read. Now, standing before it at midnight, the joke didn't seem funny anymore. 12 brothers surrounded the coffin in a circle, all wearing ceremonial robes, all holding candles. Their faces were hidden in shadow. Thomas recognized some voices, but couldn't match them to faces. The worshipful master stood at the head of the coffin. His voice was deep and measured. "Brother Brennan, you have reached the threshold. To pass beyond requires sacrifice, requires surrender, requires death." Thomas nodded. He'd studied the ritual, read about it in the lodge library. This was the degree of rebirth. Practiced for over 200 years. Hundreds of men had done this before him. Thousands, maybe. They'd all survived, all walked out, all been transformed, or so they claimed. Thomas wanted that transformation, wanted the knowledge, wanted to be part of something ancient and powerful, something that connected him to generations of brothers. "Remove your outer garments," the master instructed. Thomas took off his jacket, his tie, his shoes, until he stood in just his shirt and pants, barefoot on cold stone. The candles flickered, the air smelled like wax and something else, something older, mustier, like the room had been sealed for years. "Approach the vessel," the master said. Thomas stepped forward. The coffin looked smaller up close, narrower, like it had shrunk. "Lie down," the master commanded. Thomas climbed in. The wood was cold against his back, rough, unfinished. His shoulders touched both sides, his feet pressed against the bottom. There was no extra space, no room to move. He could reach up and touch the lid if he wanted, but he kept his hands at his sides, like a corpse, like they'd instructed. "Close your eyes," the master said. Thomas obeyed. The chanting began, low, rhythmic, words in a language Thomas didn't recognize. Latin, maybe, or something older. The voices surrounded him, above him, filling the room, filling his head. He focused on breathing, slow and steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth. This was meditation, that's all. Controlled breathing in a confined space. Nothing supernatural, nothing to fear. Then he heard the lid moving, wood scraping against wood. The sound made his chest tight, made his breathing faster. The light from the candles disappeared. Darkness pressed down, complete and total. Thomas couldn't see his own hands, couldn't see anything. The chanting continued, louder now, Or maybe it just seemed louder in the darkness. In the enclosed space, Thomas tried to stay calm, tried to remember this was symbolic, temporary. In a few minutes they'd open the lid, welcome him back, reborn. But the chanting didn't stop. It went on and on. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Thomas lost track of time. His heart pounded. Sweat soaked his shirt. The air felt thick, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. How much oxygen was in here? How long could he last? He wanted to push the lid open, wanted to get out. But that would mean failure, weakness. He'd never be invited back, never reach the higher degrees, never know the secrets. So he stayed, eyes closed, breathing shallow, counting heartbeats, trying to ignore the pressure, the darkness, the fear crawling up his spine. The chanting became background noise, a drone, constant and unchanging. Thomas focused on it, used it as an anchor, a reminder he wasn't alone. The brothers were still there, still watching over him, still protecting him. This was safe, controlled. They'd done this before. Then the chanting stopped, all at once. Complete silence. Thomas's eyes snapped open. Not that it mattered. The darkness was the same. But something felt different, wrong. The air felt colder, heavier, like the room had changed, like he wasn't where he'd been before. "Hello?" Thomas called out. His voice sounded muffled, absorbed by the coffin, by the darkness. No response, no sound at all. Thomas waited. 5 seconds, 10, 20. Still nothing. Where were the brothers? Why had they stopped? This wasn't part of the ritual he'd read about. The chanting was supposed to continue until the lid opened, until the rebirth was complete, unless something had gone wrong, unless they'd left, unless he was alone. Thomas's breathing quickened, panic rising. He reached up, pressed his hands against the lid. It didn't move. He pushed harder. Nothing. It was locked, or held down, or something. "Let me out," Thomas said, louder now, almost shouting. "The ritual's over. Let me out." Silence. His heart hammered. This wasn't right. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He pushed against the lid with all his strength. It didn't budge. He was trapped, actually trapped, in a coffin, in the dark, with no way out. Terror flooded through him, pure and primal. The kind of fear that shut down rational thought. The kind that made you an animal. Thomas pounded on the lid. "Help! Someone help me!" His voice cracked, desperate. He kicked at the sides, the bottom. The coffin didn't break, didn't crack. It was solid, built to last, built to hold a body, built to be buried. Oh God! What if that was the plan? What if this wasn't a ritual? What if this was something else, something permanent? Thomas's mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Then he heard it, a breath, quiet, close, coming from inside the coffin. With him. Thomas froze, stopped pounding, stopped moving, stopped breathing, listening. The sound came again, definitely a breath, in, out, slow and steady. But Thomas wasn't breathing. He was holding his breath, which meant someone else was in here, someone else was breathing, someone he couldn't see. "Who's there?" Thomas whispered. The breathing continued, unchanged, unaffected by his question. Thomas reached out into the darkness. His hands touched the sides of the coffin, the lid above, the bottom beneath, nothing else, no one else. But the breathing didn't stop. It was right next to his ear now, right beside him, sharing the darkness, sharing the space, sharing the coffin. Thomas screamed, a raw, terrified sound. He thrashed, kicked, pushed, anything to get out, anything to escape. The breathing grew louder, faster, matching his panic, feeding on it. Then a whisper, so quiet Thomas almost missed it, almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. But he hadn't. The voice was real, cold, dead, ancient, and it said one word that made Thomas's blood freeze. "Welcome!" Thomas's scream died in his throat. The breathing stopped. The darkness became absolute. And in that moment, Thomas Brennan understood. This wasn't a ritual about facing mortality. This was mortality, real and final and permanent. The coffin wasn't empty, it never had been. And now it held two, one living, one not, one who'd entered willingly, one who'd been waiting for years, waiting for decades, waiting for someone foolish enough to lie down and close their eyes, someone like Thomas. The lid wouldn't open, the brothers wouldn't come, because this was the real ritual, the one they didn't write about, the one they didn't explain, the one you only learned when it was too late, when the darkness swallowed you, when the voice whispered your name, when you realized the empty coffin was never empty at all. It was just waiting, always waiting, and now Thomas would wait too. For the next brother, the next initiate, the next fool who believed in tradition more than truth. In the darkness, Thomas felt a hand, cold, skeletal, real. It rested on his chest, right above his heart, feeling it beat, counting, waiting, and the voice whispered again, closer now, like lips against his ear. Your turn to wait, brother, your turn to whisper, your turn to welcome the next one home. Thomas opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came. Only darkness, only silence, only the endless, suffocating truth of the empty coffin and the thing that lived inside. Thomas woke up screaming. His eyes snapped open, light, blessed burning light. He was on the floor of the ritual room. The coffin lid was open, empty. The brothers stood around him in a circle, concerned faces, worried voices. "Brother Brennan, are you all right?" the master asked. Thomas gasped for air. His shirt was soaked through with sweat. His hands were shaking. "There was someone in there, someone with me. I heard them, felt them." The brothers exchanged glances. The master knelt beside him. "It's a common experience. The darkness. The confinement. The mind plays tricks, creates sensations that aren't real. It's part of the process, part of facing your mortality." Thomas shook his head violently. "No, this was real. I felt a hand, heard breathing, heard a voice." The master's expression didn't change. "What did the voice say?" Thomas hesitated. The word echoed in his mind. "Welcome." But saying it out loud felt dangerous. Like speaking it would make it more real. "Nothing," Thomas lied. "Just sounds. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was my imagination." The master helped him stand. "The ritual is complete. You've faced death and returned. You're reborn into the higher mysteries. Congratulations, Brother Brennan." The other men applauded. Formal, ritualistic. But Thomas noticed something. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Their congratulations felt hollow, rehearsed, like they were going through motions they'd performed many times before. Thomas went home that night, but couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in the coffin, back in the darkness, feeling that cold hand on his chest, hearing that dead voice whisper. He turned on every light in his apartment, sat on the couch until dawn. His phone buzzed around 6 a.m., text from an unknown number. "We need to talk about what you heard in the coffin. Meet me at Morrison's Diner, 7 a.m., come alone." Thomas stared at the message. Who was this? How did they know about the voice? He should ignore it, delete it, forget the whole thing. But he couldn't. He needed answers. Needed to know if he was losing his mind or if something real had happened in that coffin. At 7, Thomas walked into Morrison's. The diner was mostly empty. Morning regulars, coffee drinkers. A man in the corner booth waved him over. Thomas recognized him from the lodge. James Hartford. He'd been one of the brothers standing in the circle last night. "Sit down," James said quietly. Thomas slid into the booth. "How did you know I'd come?" James smiled, but it was sad. Tired. "Because you heard it, and once you hear it, you can't ignore it, can't pretend it didn't happen." Thomas leaned forward. "What was it? What's in that coffin?" James looked around, making sure no one was listening. Not what? Who? His name was Martin Cross. He was a brother, initiated in 1847. Thomas felt cold. That's over 170 years ago. James nodded. Martin took the ritual seriously, too seriously. He studied death, obsessed over it, wanted to truly die and be reborn. Not symbolically, literally. So one night during his own ritual, he asked the brothers to seal him in, completely, no air holes, no way out. He wanted to experience actual death, wanted to cross the threshold and return. That's insane, Thomas whispered. James continued. They argued, tried to talk him out of it, but Martin was determined, and the lodge back then valued commitment above all else. So they did it, sealed him in the coffin, performed the ritual, waited. When they opened the lid an hour later, Martin was dead, but something was wrong. His eyes were open, his mouth was open, like he was trying to speak, like he'd changed his mind at the end. Thomas's stomach turned. They killed him. James shook his head. They gave him what he asked for, what he demanded. But yes, technically, they killed him, and they couldn't report it, couldn't explain it. So they buried him, not in a cemetery, in the lodge, under the ritual room, right beneath where the coffin sits during ceremonies. Thomas felt dizzy. You're saying his body is still there, under the floor? His body, yes, James said carefully, but not just his body. Something else stayed too, something that lives in that coffin, that waits in the darkness. Every initiate who goes through the ritual feels it, hears it, some more than others. The ones who are sensitive, the ones who are open, they hear Martin's voice, feel his presence. He's still trying to complete the ritual, still trying to be reborn, and he uses us to do it. Thomas pushed his coffee away. Why are you telling me this? Why not the master? Why not the lodge? James looked directly at him. Because they know. They've always known. It's part of the ritual now, part of the test, to see who can handle it, who breaks, who stays silent. I'm telling you because I saw your face last night. I know what you experienced, and I know what comes next. What comes next? Thomas asked. James leaned back. Martin doesn't let go. Once you've shared the coffin with him, he stays with you in your dreams, in dark rooms, in quiet moments. You'll hear his breathing, feel his presence. He wants out, wants to be reborn through someone living. And he's been trying for over 100 years. Every initiate is a new opportunity, a new vessel. Thomas stood up abruptly. I'm going to the police. I'm reporting this. All of it. James grabbed his wrist. And tell them what? That a ghost is haunting you. That you heard a voice in a coffin during a ritual you volunteered for. They'll think you're crazy. The lodge will deny everything, destroy any evidence. They've done it before. Thomas pulled his hand away. Then I'll dig up the floor myself, prove Martin's buried there. Others have tried, James said quietly. They never find anything. The lodge moves the body, or maybe Martin moves himself. I don't know. All I know is that once you're in that coffin, once you hear his voice, you're marked. You're his, and fighting it only makes it worse. Thomas's hands were shaking again. So what do I do? Just accept this? Live with a dead man in my head? James pulled out a small leather journal, slid it across the table. This belonged to another brother, Robert Chen. He went through the ritual in 2003, started documenting what happened after, the experiences, the encounters, the ways Martin manifests. Robert eventually found a way to quiet him, to keep him at bay. It's all in here. Thomas picked up the journal. The leather was worn, soft. Where's Robert now? James's expression darkened. He died 5 years ago, heart attack. He was 38. Thomas dropped the journal. Martin killed him. James picked it up, put it back in Thomas's hand. Maybe, or maybe the stress did. Or maybe it was just coincidence, I don't know. But Robert lasted 15 years after his ritual. That's longer than most. And the journal helped. It can help you too. Thomas clutched the journal. Why don't you just stop doing the ritual? Stop putting people in that coffin. James stood up. Put money on the table for the coffee. Because it's tradition. Because the lodge believes the ritual is valuable. Because they think facing Martin is facing mortality itself. And because the men in charge went through it too. They survived, so everyone else should. That's how they see it. That's insane, Thomas said. James nodded. Welcome to the Brotherhood, Thomas. The real Brotherhood, not the charity dinners and the public ceremonies. The dark one, the secret one, the one that costs more than dues. He walked toward the door, stopped, turned back. Read the journal, follow Robert's instructions, and whatever you do, don't go back in that coffin. Martin's waiting, and next time he might not let you leave. James left. Thomas sat alone in the booth, the journal heavy in his hands. Outside, the sun was rising. People were starting their normal days, going to work, living regular lives. Thomas envied them, because his life would never be normal again. Not after last night. Not after hearing that voice. Not after learning the empty coffin was a grave. And the grave was still occupied. Thomas spent the next 3 days reading Robert Chen's journal. Every page was filled with meticulous notes, dates, times, descriptions of encounters. Robert had been thorough, obsessive even. The first entry was dated 2 days after his ritual. Woke up at 3:17 a.m., felt pressure on my chest, like someone sitting on me, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, heard breathing that wasn't mine, lasted 47 seconds. When it stopped, I smelled old wood and earth. The entries continued, week after week, month after month. The encounters escalated. Robert heard whispers in empty rooms, saw shadows that moved wrong, felt cold spots in his apartment that had no source. He documented everything with scientific precision, like he was studying a phenomenon instead of living through a nightmare. Thomas understood why. Documentation made it real, made it something you could analyze, control, fight. One entry stood out, 6 months after the ritual. I figured out the pattern. Martin appears most strongly in enclosed spaces, closets, bathrooms, cars with the doors closed, anywhere that mimics the coffin. He's strongest in darkness, weakest in light. He's also stronger when I'm alone. When there are witnesses, he retreats. He doesn't want to be seen by anyone who hasn't been in the coffin. Thomas had already experienced this. 2 nights ago, he'd gone to the bathroom at 3 a.m., closed the door, turned on the light. And in the mirror, for just a second, he'd seen a face behind his own. Pale, sunken, eyes too wide, mouth open like it was screaming. Thomas had spun around, nothing there, but when he looked back at the mirror, his own reflection was wrong. The expression wasn't his. The eyes weren't his. For 5 terrible seconds, Martin had looked out through Thomas's face. Robert's later entries described similar experiences. He's trying to wear me. That's the only way I can describe it. Like putting on a suit. He wants my body, my life, my breath. The ritual was supposed to be his rebirth, but it failed. So now he takes pieces of us, little bits, using our bodies to live again, even if only for seconds. Thomas found Robert's survival techniques near the middle of the journal. Rules I've learned. Never be in complete darkness. Keep a light source always. Never sleep in enclosed spaces. No curtains around the bed. Keep doors open when possible. Don't be alone in tight spaces. Avoid basements. Avoid anywhere that feels like a coffin. Most importantly, never acknowledge him directly. Don't speak to him. Don't respond to his whispers. Acknowledgement gives him power, makes him more real. Thomas tried following the rules. He kept lights on constantly, slept with his bedroom door open, avoided enclosed spaces. It helped. The encounters became less frequent, less intense, but they didn't stop. Martin was patient, persistent, always waiting for Thomas to slip, to forget, to let his guard down for just a moment. On the fourth night, Thomas made a mistake. He was exhausted. The constant vigilance was draining. He fell asleep on the couch with the TV on, woke up at 3 a.m. in darkness. The TV had turned off, the lights had turned off, everything was black. And Thomas knew immediately he wasn't alone. He could hear breathing. Slow, steady, coming from inches away. Thomas didn't move, didn't speak, remembering Robert's rules. Don't acknowledge him. But the breathing got closer, louder. He felt coldness on his face, like someone leaning over him, like a face hovering inches from his own. Thomas's hand slowly reached for his phone, for the flashlight. His fingers closed around it. He pressed the button. Light flooded the room. Nothing there. But the couch cushion next to him was compressed, like someone had been sitting there, like someone had just stood up. Thomas didn't sleep the rest of that night. He read more of the journal, found an entry from Robert's second year. I went back to the lodge tonight, confronted the master, demanded they do something about Martin. He looked at me like I was insane, said the ritual was complete, said whatever I was experiencing was psychological, not supernatural. He suggested therapy. When I insisted, he got angry, said I was breaking my oath by discussing lodge matters, threatened to expel me if I continued. Another entry, dated a year later. I tried to dig up the ritual room floor, snuck in late at night with tools, got 3 feet down before lodge security found me. They called it vandalism, said I was having a breakdown, forced me into counseling as a condition of remaining a member. The counselor was a brother. Everything I told him went back to the lodge. I stopped talking after that. Thomas felt a chill. The lodge wasn't going to help. They either didn't believe Martin existed or didn't care. Either way, Thomas was on his own. He kept reading, found Robert's final entries. The handwriting was shakier here, less controlled. Year 15. Martin is getting stronger, or I'm getting weaker. Can't tell anymore. He appears in daylight now, in crowds. Other people can't see him, but I can. Always watching, always following, always breathing. The second to last entry was brief. I don't think I'm going to make it. Martin wants completion, wants his rebirth, and I'm so tired of fighting, so tired of lights and open doors and never being alone in the dark. Maybe I should let him in. Maybe that's the only way this ends. Maybe that's what he's been waiting for all along. Permission. The final entry was a single sentence. If you're reading this, don't give up. Don't let him win. Someone has to break the cycle. It was dated 3 days before Robert Chen's death. Thomas closed the journal. His hands were shaking. Robert had fought for 15 years and still lost. How was Thomas supposed to do better? How was anyone? His phone rang. Unknown number. Thomas almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello? Static on the other end. Then breathing. That slow, steady breathing he knew too well. Thomas's blood went cold. Who is this? More breathing. Then a whisper. Faint, but clear. Let me in, Thomas. Let me be born again. End your suffering. End mine. Just open the door. Thomas threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall, clattered to the floor, still working, still connected, still transmitting that terrible breathing. Thomas grabbed his keys, his wallet. He had to get out, had to go somewhere public, somewhere with light and people and life. He ran to his car, started the engine, pulled out of the parking lot too fast, didn't care where he was going, just away. Away from the apartment, away from the darkness, away from Martin. But as he drove, he caught glimpses in the rearview mirror. A pale face in the back seat. There for a second, gone the next. And Thomas realized with creeping horror that Robert had been wrong about one thing. You couldn't run from Martin, because Martin wasn't in a place. He was in the people who'd shared his coffin, in their minds, in their reflections, in their shadows, and there was nowhere far enough to escape yourself. Thomas pulled into a 24-hour diner. Bright lights, other customers, safety in numbers. He sat in a booth, ordered coffee he wouldn't drink, tried to calm down, tried to think. There had to be a way out, a way to break this. Robert hadn't found it. But maybe Thomas could. Maybe he could be the one to finally end Martin's century-old ritual. Or maybe he'd just be another name in a journal. Another brother who tried and failed. Another victim of the empty coffin. Thomas spent the next week researching. Not just Robert's journal, everything. He went to the public library, searched historical records, newspaper archives, death certificates. He found Martin Cross's obituary from 1847. Died suddenly during a private ceremony, survived by no known relatives, buried in accordance with his final wishes. No mention of the lodge, no details about what happened, just careful, deliberate vagueness. He found more. Other deaths connected to the lodge over the years, brothers who died young, heart attacks, accidents, suicides. More than seemed normal, more than seemed coincidental. Thomas made a list, 12 names spanning 170 years. All of them had gone through the ritual. All of them had died within 20 years. Robert Chen was number 12. Thomas would be number 13 if he didn't find a solution. He started visiting the other brothers from his ritual night, carefully, casually, asking innocent questions. Most of them brushed him off, said the ritual was just theater, said they hadn't experienced anything unusual. But their eyes told different stories. They were lying, or trying to convince themselves. Either way, they wouldn't help. They'd accepted Martin as part of the price, part of what the lodge demanded. Then Thomas found James Hartford again, met him at the same diner, different booth, same desperate energy. "I need to know something," Thomas said. "Have you been in the coffin? Have you done the ritual?" James nodded slowly. 7 years ago. I hear him too, feel him. I've learned to live with it. Thomas leaned forward. Robert Chen lasted 15 years, then died. You're at 7. How many more do you think you have? James's face went pale. I don't think about it that way. Thomas pulled out his list, 12 names, 12 death dates. I do. And the pattern is clear. Martin is killing us. Slowly. Feeding on us until there's nothing left. And the lodge either doesn't know or doesn't care. Either way, we're on our own. James stared at the list. What do you want from me? I want to end this, Thomas said. Not just survive it, end it, permanently. And I think I know how. James looked skeptical. Robert tried everything, confronting the lodge, digging up the floor, following rules. Nothing worked. Thomas nodded. Because he was fighting the symptom, not the cause. Martin is trapped, stuck between death and rebirth. The ritual was supposed to free him. Instead, it imprisoned him. He's been trying to complete it for over a century, using us as proxies. But what if we actually completed it? What if we gave him what he wanted? James shook his head. You mean let him possess you? Let him take your body? That's insane. Thomas pulled out Robert's journal, pointed to a specific entry. Robert wrote that Martin is strongest in enclosed spaces that mimic the coffin, weakest in open spaces with light. What if that's the key? What if we reverse the ritual, take him out of the darkness, out of the coffin, force him into the light, into life, into the world he's been trying to reach? How? James asked. Thomas had thought about this, planned it. We go back to the lodge, back to the ritual room. We open the coffin in daylight, not midnight, no candles, no darkness, just pure sunlight. And we call to Martin, invite him out, give him permission to leave the coffin, to finish his ritual, to be reborn, not into us, into the world. James was quiet for a long time. That's either brilliant or suicidal, maybe both. Thomas smiled grimly. Probably both. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the next decade waiting to die. Are you with me? James looked at the list of names again. 12 dead brothers, 12 failed attempts at living with Martin. When? Tomorrow, Thomas said. Noon, when the sun is highest, when the light is strongest. I'll break into the lodge if I have to, but I'm doing this, with or without help. James stood up. You'll have help. I'll bring tools, crowbars if we need them. And I know someone else. Another brother from my ritual year. He'll come too. Strength in numbers. The next day, 3 men stood outside the lodge at noon. Thomas, James, and Michael Porter, who'd done the ritual 8 years ago. Michael's hands shook. This is breaking and entering. We could be arrested. Thomas tried the front door. It was unlocked. Or we could save our lives. Your choice. They went inside. The ritual room looked different in daylight. Smaller, less imposing. Light streamed through high windows Thomas hadn't noticed at night. The coffin sat in the center, exactly where it had been, exactly where it always was. Thomas approached it slowly. "Martin Cross," he called out. His voice echoed. "We know you're here. We know you've been waiting. We're here to finish what was started, to complete your ritual, to set you free." Silence. The room felt normal. Empty. Michael laughed nervously. "Maybe there's nothing here. Maybe we've all been imagining it." Then the temperature dropped. Suddenly, dramatically, their breath came out in clouds. The windows frosted over, and the coffin lid slowly opened, by itself. No one touching it, just rising on invisible hinges, opening like a mouth. Thomas forced himself to look inside. The coffin was empty, just bare wood, but the air above it shimmered, like heat waves, like something trying to take shape. "Martin," Thomas said again, "this is your chance. Come out, come into the light. Be reborn, not in darkness, not in secret, but here, now, in the world you've been trying to reach." The shimmering intensified, a shape formed, vague, translucent, the outline of a man, thin, gaunt, desperate. It hovered above the coffin, reaching toward the sunlight streaming through the windows. The shape's mouth opened. A sound came out, not words, just a long, agonized cry, a century of longing and pain compressed into one terrible sound. Thomas stepped closer. "You don't need us anymore. You don't need to wait in the darkness. You don't need to haunt the brothers. You can leave. You can rest. The ritual is complete. You faced death. You crossed the threshold. Now cross back. Be reborn into whatever comes next." The shape flickered, reaching, straining. The sunlight seemed to pull at it, draw it upward. For a moment the shape became clearer. Thomas could see a face. Young, maybe 30, terrified. This was Martin Cross, not a monster, not a demon, just a man who'd made a terrible mistake and had been paying for it for over 170 years. Thomas felt unexpected pity. "Go," he said softly. "You're free. We release you." The shape dissolved, not violently, gently, like mist in sunlight. The cold disappeared. The windows cleared. The coffin lid fell shut with a soft thud, and the room felt different, lighter, empty in a way it hadn't been before. Thomas looked at James and Michael. "Is he gone?" Michael whispered. Thomas nodded slowly. "I think so. I can't feel him anymore. Can you?" James closed his eyes, concentrating. "No, nothing. The presence is gone. The weight is gone." He opened his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "I've felt that weight for 7 years, and it's just gone." Michael laughed, a genuine, relieved laugh. "We did it. We actually did it." Thomas sat down heavily, the adrenaline draining. "We did what the lodge should have done 170 years ago. We finished the ritual properly. We let him complete his journey." They left the lodge together, walking out into bright afternoon sunlight. Behind them the ritual room stood empty. The coffin remained, but it was truly empty now. No presence, no breathing, no voice whispering in the darkness. Martin Cross had finally been reborn, not into another body, not into another life, but into whatever lay beyond, into the peace he'd been seeking since 1847. Thomas went home that night and slept without lights on for the first time in weeks. No dreams, no whispers, no cold presence sitting on his chest. He woke up at 9 a.m. feeling more rested, than he had in a month. His phone rang. James. I slept through the night, no encounters, no fear. It's really over. Thomas smiled. It's over. But that night at the lodge, the worshipful master stood in the ritual room, looking at the coffin, looking at the open windows that should have been closed. He knew what had happened. 3 brothers had broken protocol, had interfered with tradition, had released what should have stayed contained. He should be angry, should punish them. Instead, he felt relieved. The master had done the ritual 40 years ago, had lived with Martin's presence ever since, had felt the weight, the fear, the slow draining of life. He'd watched 12 brothers die, had watched the pattern repeat, and hadn't known how to stop it, hadn't known it could be stopped. Now, these 3 young brothers had done what he couldn't, had broken the cycle, had ended the haunting. The master closed the windows, locked the ritual room, and made a decision. The coffin ritual would be retired, filed away as historical record. No more initiates would be sealed in darkness. No more brothers would share space with the dead. The lodge would find new rituals, new traditions, ones that didn't cost lives. Martin Cross would be the last, the final victim of the empty coffin, and the lodge would be better for it. Thomas received a letter a week later, from the master, brief, formal. Your actions, while unorthodox, have been noted. The ritual has been permanently discontinued. The coffin will be removed and buried, properly this time. Your membership stands in good standing. Thank you for your service to the Brotherhood. It wasn't an apology, wasn't an admission, but it was acknowledgement, and it was enough.